that's when I realized that there was a note, handwritten note from the hotel where the women were staying to a dock where the offender had taken them out on a boat. And I just asked, who wrote the note? And they said, well, Joan Rogers. I said, well, how do you know that?
Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz.
Hey, everyone.
Today we have a very special guest with us, a celebrity inside and out of the law enforcement community, Jana Monroe. Jana was the first female agent in the behavioral science unit and the inspiration behind the Jodie Foster character, Clarice Starling, in The Silence of the Lambs. Jana, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you, Ray and Fitz. It's my pleasure and my honor. I'm really glad to be here.
And I want to say up front, Jana, that we'll talk a little bit more how to access it, but you have a brand new book out, Hearts of Darkness. I know the first part, the Behavioral Science Unit and My Life as a Woman in the FBI, and serial killers up front.
Yeah, and serial killers, but not my life as a serial killer, just in study. Yeah. We just want
I love
clarity.
to play with pronouns. Yes. Hearts of Darkness. And I love the Joseph Conrad connection there to Heart of Darkness. And I've being an author of a few books as a profiler myself, I find you put the word mind, heart, or monster in your title, and it's due to be a bestseller. So
Yeah,
you're off to a good start.
Well, thank you very much. And it's still surprising to me how much the public has an interest in that.
It is. And I think you're going to have a special take on it, being a woman and the absolute first. I also like in Heart of Darkness, the protagonist's name was Marlowe, and of course you're Monroe, and also it was his. The overall theme is there much of a difference between civilized people and savages? I use those in quotation marks, and quite frankly, as profilers, as investigators, sometimes there's a thin line, sometimes there's not, and we can talk about all those things.
Great. Yeah, I think you're right.
And we will.
Especially the thin line. Yeah, because sometimes it is there.
Jana, we usually like to start out with, for our younger listeners and viewers and everyone out there, is what's your early life like, going to school, where you grew up, and tell us about how you got into law enforcement.
Okay, well, I grew up in Long Beach, California, so I was a Southern California girl, but it was way different than it is now. Let's just say things have changed considerably. But I was odd, and maybe I still am, I don't know. But I was one of these that at an early age, 13, I knew what I wanted to be, and I never wavered from that, never fluctuated. So it wasn't like, some people, I'm going to be a nurse this year, next year an astronaut, and next year a teacher. The reason, and I did not have a role model such as, father, brothers, anybody that was in law enforcement, but I love this country, and I love the fact that we're a nation of laws and liberties, and I wanted to be a part of that equilibrium, part of that protection. And I hate bullies. I hate people who take advantage of others and the vulnerable. And I thought, how can I serve both of those callings? And law enforcement seemed to be the answer. So that was what I wanted to do from an early age. And unfortunately, I was interested in the FBI. Not that part's not unfortunate, but at the time I was interested, women could be a secretary, and you two know what this is, a rotor clerk. You could be a rotor clerk, but you could not be an agent. And I was not interested in either of those two functions.
And you stuck with your guns, and you made it to the special agent. But you were probation officer, I believe, and police officer beforehand?
Right. So what I had done is when I was going into college, I went to one of those career fairs, and there was this nice FBI guy. Well, he actually turned out not to be so nice, but he was the one that told me I wasn't qualified. And I said, yeah, I know that. That's why I want to see what kind of courses I should take in college to be more, marketable, competitive. And he said, well, you can never be an agent because you're a female. Like, okay. So, and as you recall, Mr. Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover passed away in 1972, and it was a class action suit. I was not a part of that, but it was a class action suit that then allowed women to enter the FBI as special agents. But in the interim, I thought, what would prepare me the best? So I joined the San Bernardino County Probation Department, and then was in the Chino, and then lateraled over to the Upland Police Departments, all still Southern California.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I actually stayed in that area longer than I intended for two reasons. Number one, I think I was getting some really good experience. And number two, I was actually enjoying it. But then I had not, I kept my eye on the ball of my goal, which was to join the FBI. So it was time.
So that was always the goal from the outset. The police departments and probation were just stepping stones. Right. And again, in the FBI, you can come in that diversified, modified program. But I thought, being a teacher, a librarian, and although very good professions, that would not make me as competitive as starting in law enforcement and then going into federal law enforcement. You kind of came in, and you were early on when females were still trying to find their way within the Bureau. And moving from the police department into the FBI and going to Quantico, did you find it difficult for you moving through training? I did not. Training is challenging, so I'm not saying anything about that, but it was similar to the training I had previously. So as far as academy, it went from, state and local laws to federal laws. I think the part that was challenging, maybe for everybody, was just the pace, just keeping up the pace with everything, with the firearms, with the physical training, with the educational courses, with practicals. So all of that was, like I said, a little taxing. And what was your first office when you got your orders, as we all did? And I remember that night in week 7 or 8, whatever it was, because it was only at that time when you went through, and Jim and I, not that far apart, but at that time it was probably 13 or 14 weeks. Right. The academy, which is much longer now. So what was your first office? Okay, so this part's funny because, as you recall, they make you get up, and I don't know in your classes, but we got up in front of the classes. I can make it analogous to the Academy Awards, right? You open up the envelope. Well, my part was, and it was embarrassing. I don't think anybody knew it at the time. I opened it up, and I'd never seen Albuquerque spelled before. So I'm going Albuquerque. Yeah, to myself. I didn't say that out loud. Finally, I figured it out. And I'm like, oh, New Mexico. That's where I'm going. So it was interesting. That's not what I put. As you know, the Bureau teases you and asks what your preferences would be. And then they take great joy in sending you somewhere else.
Their famous line used to be, "We guarantee you we'll put you within 50 miles of an airport that can take you home." Yeah. Right. Great. Yeah, that's Thank you, Bureau people. And they did do that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, they did do that. I was close to the airport, but that was about all.
But for a Southern California girl, obviously a woman at this point, you weren't too far away from home, I suppose, if as the crow flies.
No, but let me tell you about this, though, Jim. So I was one of the consummate shoppers at that time. So as you can imagine, in the LA area and Orange County area of California, all these great shopping. I go to Albuquerque, and it was like they had a C mall, and that was it. And then what they did was give me a TDY, temporary duty, in Gallup, New Mexico, for people who've not been there. Yeah, it's a hardship office for the FBI.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the young people out there, back in the mid 80s, there was no Amazon. So if you were a shopaholic or really liked to shop, you just couldn't go online and do it. You actually had to go to stores in the old days. So I feel your pain even a few decades later.
Yes. I mean, you should have seen the unattractive shoes that they had available. It was pretty bad.
Well, I know they had a lot of moccasins. Right? Out there in New Mexico.
Yes, actually, you're correct.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about your fashion acumen coming up in a bit regarding ballistic material. But Ray, you had a question or two. Go ahead.
So how long did you stay in Albuquerque and then you make your way up, and you make. Did you go through a couple other offices after that? Usually, it was 2 or 3 years. You're in an
Right.
office, and they move you.
A little bit of an anomaly for this one, Ray, is because Dale and I got married. So he was in the Tampa office. I was in Albuquerque. I stayed 10 months. We got married. And then, they attempt to accommodate a common household. And I'd heard horror stories like, oh, it takes 8 months to a year. They actually transferred me within 7 weeks, and I went to Tampa. So that was how I got to my second office.
Wow, that's great. What a change from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And the third office was even more so. It was to Washington Field Office in D.C., and that's back when they had the old Buzzard Point. And if you recall that, it was not a very nice area of Southeast D.C., and we actually had a T-shirt that said, "I survived Buzzard Point." So got my experience in there too.
So what are you working when you're out in the field? When you go out when you get out to Albuquerque, then you get to Tampa, then you get to WFO, Washington Field Office. What are some of the violations that they have you working?
Well, I made myself unpopular in actually all of the offices for what I did. In that we used to call them the reactive squad or the violent crime squad. Every office I went to, there were no females on it. And so I'd go into the SAC kind of like I was auditioning for an interview and said, this really makes no sense to me that you have, we all do applicants, and applicants was great for interviewing, but then they would put me on a squad that was totally had nothing to do with my background. And I'd say, I notice you have no women, no females on this squad. And oh, by the way, I had worked in law enforcement for almost 8 years prior to coming in. And every time they did put me on the criminal squad, and every time I jumped ahead of quite a few of my male counterparts who were on a waiting list. So as you can imagine, that did not endear me to them.
I'll bet.
Yeah. But I got a lot of experience back to the question about what kind of crimes. It was kidnappings. That's when the FBI was doing quite a bit of fugitive work, bank robberies, those types of things. And in Tampa, there were a lot of bank robberies.
And Jana, in the mid-'80s, when you were there, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, but a prolific serial killer in the Tampa area, was that during your time frame as a field agent, or was that later in the behavioral unit?
Yeah, I think that was later in the behavioral unit. So, but
right,
you're not talking about, I don't think, Oba Chandler, George Treepall. Okay.
When these names come to me, or these images, but I don't have the exact name, but obviously, if you didn't work them there, you certainly got into it before long. So, how did it work? The next step with you, by the way, because I remember when I saw the profiling unit position open up, I saw at 9 o'clock that morning. I had to get everything in by 5 o'clock that afternoon on the computer, get the bosses sign things off. But so you're in the Tampa office one day. How does the behavioral science unit position open up, and how does it come about?
Okay, I'll take it a little out of chronology. When I was in the Tampa division, I know you're familiar with this, the NCABC, National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime Coordinator position was open, and I had that position. So I had quite a bit of liaison and contact with the unit, and an agent by the name of Bill Hagmeyer had that Southeast territory. So I worked a lot with Bill. And that was fortuitous. And that time, Bill was interviewing at Stark Prison Ted Bundy. So he would come and see me. He being Bill Hagmeyer, not Ted Bundy, would come and see me, and we'd do a download. It was very, very educational for me as to what he was asking in the interview, the type of information that Bundy was revealing, the manner in which he did. So he shared a lot with me about those interviews. And I also, there were quite a few police departments at that time that had wanted to elicit the help of the behavioral science unit. So I would box up the materials and send it to Quantico, to the BSU, depending on what it was they wanted, link analysis, offender profile, traits, characteristics. So I got to interact a lot with the local law enforcement. So when I got
go ahead.
I'm sure
when you were the NCABC coordinator, you had gone to Quantico for a week or two at a time to get some specialized training.
Yes, I did for in-services, as we call them. Yes, I did. And then to directly answer your question, when I got to the Washington field office and jumped over all my colleagues to get on there were 18 of us on the reactive squad. Then to add insult to injury, I only stayed about 4 months because, like your experience, I received a call from Bill Hagmeyer, and he said there's an opening this morning. I got everything in. I took vacation, got everything in that day, and then interviewed with John Douglas and another agent 2 days later. Yeah,
the world famous kind of the grandfather of profiling, John Douglas. And so you got a chance to work a few years with him because our ships passed in the night. We'll come up to that in a bit, as did ours kind of in a way when I first got there. Right. So give us a time frame. You show up at and it was the behavioral science unit, right? Because there was a split after a while.
Right.
I believe you were BSU.
Yes, I was BSU, and then it went through several name iterations, and I've got the T-shirts that have the ISU, Investigative Support Unit. I was never for that one because it sounded like an investigative support, like you were not really involved in it. Then BAU, and one of my colleagues was testifying, actually, Judd Ray. I don't know if you ever met Judd Ray or not. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
He's a character, wonderful character. But anyway, he was testifying, I think it was Bordier sometime, but they said, well, the judge goes, this is not a science. You're analysts. You're not scientists. And that was kind of the catalyst for changing the name once again.
Interesting.
Then it just went to the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime for a number of years. Right. And then it wasn't until 2003, I believe, they actually changed it to the Behavioral Analysis Unit 1, 2, and 3. But the BSU was still separate. And I think finally about 5 years ago, they combined them all into like now 6 or 7 BAUs, Behavioral Analysis Units. That's
right.
Bringing us up to the present. But
yeah, you really have to have like a scorecard or something. I can imagine, the public, somebody trying to reach out for somebody. It's like, well, which one of these are you actually looking for? It would be a little complex.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I'm writing my 4th book now about right after Unabomb, I got back and I put it like in a little admin note. I'm going to call it the Profiling Unit. Now, I've never had that official name, but then I gave a little bit of clue. It was ISU, it was BSU, and I finally said Profiling Unit until we finally get to BAU, and then it makes it much more clear there. So again, first woman doing a lot of things. I know you weren't the first woman in the FBI. There were a few before you. And but you were definitely first in the BSU, but if you knew Douglas, you knew Bill Hagmeyer, I'm sure the welcome mat was out there, at least to some degree.
Right, and you know what? I think I'm very much not a history revisionist. You have to put yourself back in the time frame. Things are different. Our culture has changed. Society has changed. So no, there wasn't a welcome mat, but everybody was great to me. So I have zero complaints on that. And that's kind of just the way things were. It was like, and they even said, we're kind of taking a chance on you. And that's how things were looked at that time, right? I mean, and in the rear view mirror, people can take those comments out of context and say, oh, how horribly they treated you. No, they didn't. They were very good to me.
Well, that's good to hear. And I know Ray and I went through the police academy in 76. There was one female in my police academy class, and in my police department, Ben Salem PD, one female. So to me, from the earliest days, women were in law enforcement for my career, and they belong there. No ands, if, or buts. There are some great male investigators and law enforcement officers, some not so great. And the same applies to females, and I'm sure you would relate to that too. So each person has to be judged accordingly.
Oh, absolutely. And I look at it, some of the presentations that I do, and one of my things that is so inspiring to me is trying to encourage and inspire younger people, predominantly women, but young men too, if it's within your skill set, right? Go for it. Do it. I used to say, if I wanted to be an opera singer, then I'm way out of luck. I don't have that skill set. But if you know you can do something, don't be daunted by the lack of a welcome wagon. And another one, I'm sure I plagiarized this from someone, but if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And that's what I always did. I got, professionally invited myself. When I was in Albuquerque, none of the guys on the other squads would invite me on their arrests. How you get a team together. And so I would just go say, hey, I heard you're doing an arrest on this. I'm available. I know you're going at, 5:30 in the morning, you're assembling and doing all this. And once I showed I was really willing to work and that I, had read all about it, I knew what the operations order were, I knew what we were doing, I became more, they included me more often.
That's 90% of the battle, Jan. I mean,
right.
when you think about it, and that's how I was. If there was a fairly new agent that came on, a lot of times we would offer them to come with us. But the biggest part of that was, do they want to work?
That's
and
right.
You'll find today, at least towards the end of my career, that a lot of agents they weren't as interested in working as much as the old time bureau people were. I just see that,
Yeah, you know what? And again, I think it's culturally, it's this time frame. I mean, people look at, when I would say how many hours we worked, they look at me and it wasn't something like, gee, I admire it. It's like, oh, you poor thing. You didn't know when to stop.
Exactly.
And I loved it. It was like an adrenaline pump. And I felt, in order to do so, I wanted to be prepared for what it was I was doing. I didn't expect anybody to take me by the hand. Now, you always pay attention, you listen, and you learn. But I thought the more prepared I could be, and the only way you do that is by volunteering for things so that you get that experience.
That worked for all of us.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. So you're down in the unit. What's the first memorable case that you remember that comes across to you that you actually get involved in and you're actually running with it?
Well, this probably isn't a fair response because I only had one case and an entire time, and I think you can relate to this, Jim, that I got to see from the beginning to the end. And that was the Rogers case, the mother and two daughters that were brutally killed in Tampa Bay. And I was there on scene when they were fished out by the St. Peter's.
That's right.
Yeah, right. Blah, blah, blah. So then as a coordinator, I worked with them quite a bit on it. Then I get transferred, right? So now I'm in the unit and the case had gone cold. And that had such a negative impact. Tampa's a lot about, tourism, right? Well, their tourism was down. This case had not been resolved. And so they came to us and said, okay, we've missed something. Let's take a look at it again. So fresh set of eyes, we all looked at it. And that's when I realized that there was a note, handwritten note from the hotel where the women were staying to a dock where the offender had taken them out on a boat. And I just asked, who wrote the note? And they said, well, Joan Rogers. I said, well, how do you know that? No answers. So long story short, the officers take it to the husband. And he said, that's not my wife's handwriting. And we blew it up on a billboard. All of the merchants there were like for free, right? Okay, whatever, just blow it up. This is before the internet, right? I mean, today you look at it as a precursor to an internet style approach. But we blew up the handwriting on billboards, and in less than 48 hours, we had several people with the same name. So, Oba Chandler. Wow. So I was able to follow that, continually help out with some of the interview techniques, whatnot. And then he was actually convicted and executed. Now, I didn't go to the execution, but so when I say the most interesting case, because I got to see it from beginning to end, and it was also very disturbing because I made an effort to always refer to the cases as case, file number 152 or 165, but right. I got to recognize them and know them by name. So it made it more painful.
But think about the innovation with that. I mean, when you think about, and we're talking about, is this the early 90s?
Yes.
That you're talking about this
91.
Case?
Yeah.
Well, just think about that, 1991, and there's no internet. There's not a whole lot you can do. How are we going to find this out? And you say, you know what? Let's put it up on a bulletin board all over Tampa and see if someone can identify that. Talk about innovation and initiative. And that's what solves the case. I think that is absolutely amazing.
Well, and we're talking about detail, right? Paying attention to every little detail. Okay, how do you know that? And okay, you are assuming. That's the worst thing, as you know, in an investigation to do is assume something. You've got to know the source. So,
Jana, about 5 years later, I was at Unabom with a big debate. Do we publish the manifesto? Different set of circumstances. The internet was around then. And I do remember the case and talking about some of the old timers back there and said, yeah, I think our Jana had some success. And among other investigative clues was putting that note out there. And I borrowed from that, and we argued the point, and eventually we got the manifesto published. So, yeah, I'm a firm believer. And if there's a letter, a note, and you still have an open case, a manifesto, get it out there. Someone will identify the thoughts, ideas, even the writing.
Yeah, you're a brother. Somebody's going to take a look at that. And in this case, the reason someone would notice handwriting, again, people were handwriting more, cursive writing, which is a lost art. But what Obed Chandler had been doing, he was in his own business and building in screen patio. If you don't have a screen patio in Florida, you get eaten alive by mosquitoes, by bugs. And apparently he did very shoddy work. So he was in small claims court with a lot of people. And he added insult to injury in that he would refute claims with pages and pages of nasty notes to the clients. And so they recognized his handwriting right away. It wasn't terribly bright.
You're going to be a killer. You don't want to leave those kind of clues around.
Or be nasty.
You took us back to, that too. You took us back to Tampa, just for our listeners' sake. It was Bobby Joe Long, who was a serial killer in Tampa.
Okay.
He killed 10 women in the mid-'80s over, I think it's about 8 or 9 months, give or take. And that was before my time in the Bureau, whatever. But I know we did some research on that later on.
Yeah, I did not work on that, but my Stan Jacobson was an agent who preceded me as the coordinator, and he had quite a bit of work. He did work on that one.
So at some point, you come across the giant of a man and a bright man, Ed Kemper, and you wind up talking to him in prison. He's even calling you on the phone, I believe. Walk us through that whole relationship and how that ever came together.
Well, and I think if you look at it, and you'd mentioned John Douglas, and I think, the father of profiling, and Bob Wrestler, and he used to wrestle with that because he said he was the father of profiling. And I think they both were, and very, very valuable in what they did in devising the whole program. But they had talked to Edmund Kemper before also. And we're talking about, when you said a giant, he's 6'9". I don't know what he weighed at the time, but he big frame, big guy. And the way I would describe him, I don't like to use the word intimidating, but it kind of fits in this situation because he had that way of looking through you and into you at the same time, if that makes any sense. And I can make that analogous to Dr. Hannibal Lecter. I think, although fictitious, Anthony Hopkins in the movie Silence of the Lambs did a fabulous job of that stare where he's looking at you but not really focused and then rarely blinks. So it was kind of like that. It was one of those. And with normal, and I know there's quite a spectrum of normal people, when you're speaking to them, they'll acknowledge, they'll smile, they'll blink, they'll do something that lets you know they're receiving your information. Didn't get any of that. So no body language, no body clues that you would experience with most folks. And it's a little unsettling, to have that. And then pauses in the conversation, which, as you know, that's a powerful tool when you're the one doing the interviewing. But when it's on the other end, that can be a little unnerving too. Ask a question and then he'd sit and stare at me for what seemed like a minute, probably only 20 seconds, but it was an abnormal length of time. So
from that normal guy. And we should mention he killed a number of people, decapitated them, including his mother, correct, and other female college students.
Yeah, if you read up on him, it was brutal. I found his, the heinous nature, the egregious and grisly nature of his crimes. He killed his grandparents when he was 15.
Right.
And then he was sent to a juvenile mental facility, gets out when he's a little over 21 with one of the terms and conditions being he not live with his mother because they had such a vitriolic relation. So what does he do? Moves in with his mother. So it's shortly thereafter that he starts his killing spree with co-eds. He was dub-named the co-ed killer. But he told the police that he had to turn himself in for a couple of reasons. Number one, they were too inept to ever catch him, and he was going to continue killing unless he was confined. And so that's why he turned himself in. But we learned a lot from him in the Santa Cruz area. What he told us after the fact was he would go into they used to call them the local watering hole, a local bar where officers would go sometimes and have a drink, after work, just to, have a beer to let their hair down. Well, he would be within earshot of them and they were speaking openly about the case and what they were doing. And he would then buy them a round of beers. And nobody thought anything of it because he'd hang around a lot. So it's just like there's that Big Ed guy. And he told us how much information he was able to obtain by being friendly with them and then by just overhearing things. So it was a really valuable lesson.
Well, a lot of these offenders, as we know, they like to get involved in the investigation. And that was his way of getting involved in it, by just sitting and listening. And I understand that Kemper dated one of the Santa Cruz detective's daughters.
Yeah. Now, wouldn't that give you a fright when you realized who he was?
How about that? I mean, that's looking at him, because in one of the classes I teach, he's one of the case studies that a lot of the kids do. Right. And he's a really, really remarkable individual. I don't say that. I say he's remarkable in what he was able to do in a time period and how he was able to do it.
But he's, the other thing too, if you believe in IQ tests, I mean, we have them, right? So as much as you believe in him, he scored anywhere from like 160 to 180. So from an academic or he was a bright person, just very sociopathic and very abnormal in that. But I had a tape of him that I viewed with John Douglas and Bob Ressler when they had been talking to him. And to me, he was parroting or regurgitating what a psychiatrist would have said. So this is like his third time trying to get parole. And he would try to conjure up a tear. It was amazing watching him. And he'd say, matricide, this monotone, matricide is a horrible crime. I am now remorseful. I mean, it didn't match, but he was giving it his all in an effort for that. So it was fascinating to watch somebody that intelligent, that still couldn't mimic what normal was.
So how do you two come together? What is it that brings you and Ed Kemper together?
Well, so I did do an interview, but what happened, and you know how we did the interviews with the standardized protocol, the FBI can't give them anything. We can't give them a stay of execution, a change of prison, better food. So what do you do to get them to give you information is we appeal to their egos. And surprisingly enough, it worked most of the time. Something such as, we want to learn from you. You were so good, so adept at what you were doing. And you could do it either two ways. Say that we want to learn from you. We don't know about this, so we need to learn from you. Or if you felt that they would really go with this and say, I'm sure you don't want other people to do this. So if you could give us some of these insights, we could help prevent that from happening. Either way. Well, when I spoke with him, I'd said, yeah, thank you so much for learning from you. And if you think of other things, let me know. Obviously, I didn't give him my phone number or anything, but he knew how to contact the FBI. So I was working on a case, and apparently he had read about it. He got the information somehow. So he called headquarters, and then they put the call through to me at Quantico, and he wanted to offer some help as to how to catch this killer. And what I think it was, again, the attention, appealing to the ego. And here, obviously, here's a case you FBI people haven't been able to solve yet. So let me add my assistance.
Life imitating art in that regard, or art imitating life later with Silence of the Lambs. Before we go away from Ed Kemper, I believe in training from John Douglas. He told us he so disliked his mother that he killed her and decapitated her. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he put her head out in the garden, but where she was somehow looking up into the window, and he would do certain things up there just to, I guess, piss her off even more?
Well, what he did initially, because we can only surmise that they were having one of their screaming matches, yelling at each other. But when he killed her, he cut out her larynx and threw it down the garbage disposal. So that's where the police found it. But then what he had to do, her girlfriend was coming over. They were going on vacation the next day. So she came over in the morning, and he hadn't cleaned anything up, and he did put the head outside. So he had to kill her also. So, but yes, you're correct with that other part. So.
Yeah, and Yeah, I mean, I've sat down with some serial rapists, convicted, long, gone away. Ray has done the same thing. But I haven't quite talked to anyone like a Kemperer. And fortunately, there's aren't too many of those type of guys around. Although I'd love to have a chance with the BTK. I know some people doing some work thinking he may have committed some other murders in some other states.
Right.
And we're seeing if we can get that whole thing put together. But he'd be a fascinating person to sit down and talk to.
Absolutely. You know what I'd like to do sometime? I started it with Roy Hazelwood, rest his soul.
Rest in peace.
But then we did not get the support to do it, was interviewing significant others, wives, girlfriends of serial killers who were aware of what they were doing. Some of them even assisted with that. Yeah. And to the surprise, the few that we interviewed, one was like she had a master's degree and was an emergency room nurse. Another, they were quite accomplished and had the skill sets that I would not have thought. And I don't know if anyone else is doing that research, but to me, that's a big interest is now what's wrong with these women that are staying with these people that actually knew that. And I mean, and you look at Ted Bundy, he got married and had a conjugal visits with his wife. She knew that's when he was on death row and he had a daughter.
Well, and as you well know, some of these women, for them not to be the victims, for them not to be tortured or killed, they would then have to help these sadistic, very bad husbands, maybe psychotic, but certainly with other mental health issues, to facilitate their, capturing these women and tricking them into the van. There was a Canadian couple. I think our friend Greg McCrary worked the case of the Canadian husband and wife, and she was a big facilitator in getting women to come into their car, into their van, and that she could sit back and she wouldn't be the one tortured and killed. Although eventually they had an argument too, and I think that's when she called authorities and turned them in. So hell hath no fury like a serial killer's wife who was scorned.
Yeah, that was Paul
I see
Bernardo.
another book coming there.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
That was Paul Bernardo and Holoka, his girlfriend, girlfriend, wife. The first victim was actually her sister.
That's right.
And that was up in the Toronto area. I was in Buffalo at that time when that stuff was going on as well. But I think I read somewhere, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jana, that there was a time that you had an elevator ride or you were alone with Kemper and he made a statement to you.
Well, that was John. That was John and Bob Ressler that they had finished interviewing him and they were in the elevator. And this was really, they really shouldn't talk about it. It was a bad thing on the prison because they're never supposed to be in an elevator with them. And it was a lunch break. And one of the guards did not get in the elevator with him. And Kemper just looked down at him and said, I could kill you right now if I wanted to. And that's all he said. And John said that was the longest elevator ride. And I remember I said, well, how many floors were you going? He goes, 1. But it was the longest elevator ride I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, I'll bet it was.
Yeah.
He's a big man. You think 6'9" when he's a big man.
Well, and like I said, it was the total package of him because he would say things like that and just stare at you without any that flat affect and not an appropriate response. And just something like that would just land there. You could kill you. And it's like, okay, yeah, but are you going to? I mean, he could be very intimidating.
So now you're in the BSU. There's a book that came out a few years before by an author named Thomas Harris. And all of a sudden, someone gets a phone call or some boss at headquarters says, there's this book, Silence of the Lambs, and they want to make a movie, and they want to actually film it here. Walk us through that process. Ray and I are both involved in TV shows and series and that stuff, but you were there in the earliest days for a very successful movie. How did that all come about? And of course, you eventually met up with Jodie Foster, and you were sort of her mentor in terms of how to be an FBI agent. Walk us through that, please. Okay.
So, and probably, I don't know if you're aware of this, but at least at that point in time, headquarters really didn't know what we did, in detail. It's like there's that unit over there. And Silence of the Lambs kind of put us on the map. And we had and I'll get back to the original question, but right after the movie came out, and especially when it won the Academy Award and Jodie Foster got the Academy Award, the phone was ringing off the hooks. We had our own PIO, Public Information Officer. They sent somebody from headquarters to be with us full time for almost 2 years. because they're, well, are you going rogue? You can't be doing all these. What are you doing? Because I know John Douglas was on quite a few things, and so they made sure we were going through proper protocol with that. So we got a lot of attention from headquarters at that point in time. But yeah, the cast and
for
crew,
better or worse, right?
Yes, for better or worse. The cast and crew came down, and I say came down because the behavioral science unit at that time was 2 floors below the gun cleaning room. It was originally deemed to be J. Edgar Hoover's bomb shelter. It was not supposed to be office space. Yeah. But anyway, so the whole crew came down, and they wanted, along with Thomas Harris's, I think, original intent, he wanted to show off Quantico and the training and the academy. So they kept that genuine and did a lot of the filming there. They had some people, some agents without speaking parts, and I think a few from the physical training unit and all of some of the classrooms, the Yellow Brick Road that Jodie Foster did. But what Jodie Foster and I did was, she was very impressive. She took very professional. She took the role very seriously. She already knew her role. And then she would ask me questions like, the script says I would do this and say this. Is that what you'd really do? And I'd say, like, no, I wouldn't. Or I'd say this or that. I, of course, had no influence on anything, but she did. So if she wanted to change something in the script or say it a certain way, she pretty much got what she wanted. But we went over a lot of things like that. Just how would an agent do it? Would they say something like that? How would they behave? Would you, if you were going into a death row or a maximum security prison, how would you dress? Well, not high heels, bunch of makeup, try to make yourself as plain as possible. You're going to draw enough attention as it is. Let's not do anything else to, exacerbate the situation.
So she winds up showing up at Quantico. And by the way, I believe to this day that's the only movie or TV series ever actually filmed in Quantico. I don't think that's been. I know I did a bonus feature for Criminal Minds in 2005 or so in the library, but in terms of doing a whole movie or a series, I believe Silence of the Lambs is the only one. So you are going to have that distinction.
Yeah, I wouldn't refute that at all. I certainly can't think of anything. So yeah, and they did spend a lot of time, and I think the whole crew, at least the people that I encountered, it was a pleasant experience because they were very respectful of what we were doing, and in some of the areas people were still working and carrying on business and whatnot, and they were mindful and respectful of everything that we did. So that was nice.
And I forget the actor's name, but he was kind of portraying a composite character of John Douglas and Bob Ressler as sort of the supervisor of Clarice Starling, and I think both of them claimed he's the actor that was portraying them. So a little bit of egos with those two guys. I don't think they would even deny it. And Bob Ressler, R.I.P., he died a number of years ago, but John was certainly that way. So and he earned it. I mean, he can have a bit of an ego because he was there in the early days. So that's very interesting on that part. And you said you actually went to the theater to see it, and you were amazed basically how right they got everything.
Yeah, they had a special showing for us at a theater outside, just outside the part of Quantico, and so it was just for us. So there were maybe like 30 people because some of the crew and the cast were there also, and except for the fact that they still had Clarice as a trainee and they would not have given her a real gun and had her go do all that. That always bothered me. I said, you could make her a real agent. I'm here, but other than that part that they didn't change, I thought they really did an excellent job for that kind of a movie because it was gory at that point in time. But they did a lot. They showed some, but it wasn't something like, a dead teenager movie where they just show you hacksawing everybody. I think if you could do something tastefully, that's probably an oxymoron. They did so and tried to capture what we had advised them is how something would take place.
Yeah, and a credit to Harris for his research and writing the book, but also for the producer and director, and of course the actors for going along there. Ray, any follow up to that part for Jana?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. What about Anthony Hopkins? Did you get a chance to meet him too, Jana?
I did. And then unexpectedly, about a year later, I went to 3 different White House Correspondents' dinners in DC. So because the unit had so much attention, I got to know a lot of reporters and newspaper magazine articles. And so there were these two women that I'd been on a couple of their TV shows. Mary Madeline had a show back in the day with, I'm sorry, I don't remember the co-host, but I was on that show and a couple others. So they would invite me to that. And the table, and it was just fortuitous. They set me it was next to Anthony Hopkins. I mean, it was amazing. So he was very quiet, and even at this dinner, and I always got the sense that he was studying. I mean, he was very gracious, and of course, the lovely British accent. But it's like he was studying to maybe be another character in something. Not nearly as I would have thought, maybe more gregarious or interactive. But the few times that I spent time with him, he was not that way.
So kind of earmarked me. I always think, how did he, or who did he speak to, or who did he research to be able to play the way he did that character?
Oh, I tell you, when I like reading books, and usually the movie falls a little short because I think, like most people, you develop what the character's like in your mind, right? You see what they're supposed to look like. He's been the only one that actually exceeded my thought. I would get goosebumps when he'd say Clarice, and just how he'd stare, like I said, through you. I don't know who he didn't reveal who he studied on that, but I think he did a superb job. He was very creepy.
Oh my God, yeah. I thought that was fabulous. Have you seen the Netflix series Mindhunter? Is it Mindhunter?
Yes. I haven't finished it. I've seen 8 episodes.
Did you see the episode with Kemper?
No, I have not. I haven't seen that one
When
yet.
you see that episode, we'll have to talk again. You have to, the thing that really attracts me to it, and I look at it, is the likeness of the characters of the offenders. I was really taken by that. So when you see Kemper, the individual, you have to let me know what you think. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but you have to let me know what you think about it.
Okay, I'll put that one next on my list.
Yeah, put it on your bucket list there, Jana.
So hopefully it's not the bucket list. Yeah.
Let's the Nexus. I've heard of you before I got to Quantico. I never saw the movie Silence of the Lambs, and then I think it was like late '94, the opening for they were bringing 18 new profilers in. I think 12 to remember CASQ. We forgot about this one: Child Abduction and Serial Killer Unit. Bill Hagmeyer was in charge of that, and they were bringing in 6 new profilers to the investigative support unit. We were all special agents, all being promoted to supervisor, and I just put in for it, 8 hours, and 4 months later, I wind up getting told I get it. So I show up in Quantico this is like my 4th academy now, so to speak, and for profiling training, so to speak. And you were one of our instructors, and this is now April of '95. And I know you instructed a few of the blocks of training there. I was, very impressed with that. And I also remember something we shared, a long car ride together, because an agent named Bill Christian was killed in May of 1995. He was a Washington field office agent. He was killed hunting a fugitive, I think, in Maryland. And in early June, they had the funeral service for him. I remember about 6 of us, I think about 20 of us went from Quantico, but about 6 of us from the same car. I remember sitting next to you, Jana, and of course we were discussing his life and what it's like being an FBI agent. And we can talk about all this fun stuff with serial killers and people in prison making arrests. But the reality is agents and law enforcement officers get killed too. And I didn't know Bill. I'm not sure if you did or not. But nonetheless, we went to repay our respects. And that was a tough day, a long day. But I got to know you pretty well in the back of the car. And as bright as you were and as much as you knew your stuff, you were an interesting person and a fun person. Wow. You have to kind of have gallows humor sometimes on days like that to kind of just get through things. Because burying one of your own in that regard is very difficult. Right about a year later, you lost an agent in Philly. I know you knew him. So yeah. So that's then I hit the road. I graduate. I'm on vacation. I'm off to Unabom. I kind of lose track of what's happening. I'm this guy that's sent out to this outpost. I always said it's like the Kevin Costner character in Dancing with Wolves. I'm just like sent out to this outpost in San Francisco, and my own profilers don't even know me. Now, John Douglas had just retired. So now, summer of 95, you're about to make a move, right? Career-wise?
Yes.
Give or take?
Yes. Yep.
Tell
So
us.
summer of 95. Yeah. That's when I ended up going into the San Diego office. And the irony of that one is I had never worked a white collar crime case in my life. And so they made me the supervisor of the white collar crime squad, of course. And it was a large squad. Yes. It was the winding down of the financial institution fraud epidemic that was going on in the 90s. And so I had a squad of 21 agents, 20 men and a female, all accountants. And so the way I approached it, I said, I'm going to learn from you. I'm not an accountant, so I'm going to learn from you. And I said, I'm new to that, but I'm not new to life. So let's not confuse the two. And what we did was start a public corruption squad. San Diego had never had a public corruption squad. And they said, well, there's no corruption here. I said, that's nonsense. There's corruption everywhere. Long story short, 2 dynamite agents ended up getting, it was a 2-year-long case, and it was 5 judges and 1 attorney that were convicted of the quid pro quo for throwing cases. And so it was a huge case. So,
and that's all off your squad that you supervised?
Yes.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, it was
very
great.
impressive.
But I loved it. We didn't have to say "I told you so" because it for San Diego it was a huge case, and it was kind of like, yeah, okay, no corruption, okay. So
now, was that a lateral move to San Diego as a supervisory special agent?
Yes.
You didn't stop there.
Yeah.
What happened
I
next?
Did not stop there. Then I became the ASAC, Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Denver office, and had just about everything on that one. It was a little lopsided, but I love the experience. So I got to supervise many different cases in that one, and showed up 2 days after Columbine and the FBI SWAT. Yeah, and I was the only one there. So the SAC had not reported. One ASAC, that was a 2 ASAC office, had retired, and the other one had been promoted. So there was nobody in place. Everybody was acting. So I get there, and we had the FBI's SWAT team had augmented Jefferson County SWAT team. And what I did, there were a few of the SWAT agents that had children that had gone to Columbine. None of them had been injured, but they didn't know that when they were making entry. So what I did was get some external psychologists, not through the EAP, Employee Assistance Program, because I felt SWAT has its own culture, right? And going for counseling was never something that people would readily do. So I called the SWAT commander and SWAT team leader and said, I'm going to offer all of your SWAT team to go off, out of the building here, very private, but they can go to counseling. And he goes, none of them are going to do that. And I said, you know what? You don't have to go. It's not mandatory. I'm giving an offer. But I said, I'm going to speak to them all. And I just wanted you to be aware of that. Anyway, they all went except him. So it was great. And some went for a little over a year, and we got the FBI to pay for that. And it was just something from a psychological, there's physical health, but there's mental health. And when you have, I'll say guys, they were all men on the SWAT team, that see something like that and then have no outlet except here, go have a beer. I felt that it was really something that we should at least offer them. So.
No doubt, wise decision.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. I think that's great. You were ahead of your time, Jana. I mean, I think that's great because not many people would have done that. So I have been as a former SWAT guy. I can really attest that. I would have taken advantage of that.
Thank you. It's interesting you say that. So my husband, Dale Monroe, who were in the bureau together, right, and he was on the hostage rescue team. The whole time that I was in the behavioral science unit. And then because we moved so much, he was on every SWAT team, every move we made. And he was the SWAT team leader or the SWAT commander in 3 of the offices, which you don't see very often, right? That they're going to move from office to office. And he told me, he goes, well, I wouldn't go. And I said, that's fine. That's why I said this is not mandated. It's just an offer. And I said, but all of the guys on this team here saw something pretty horrific, and they're all quite a bit younger, and I said, we're talking about different generations and people gravitating to different things. So I said, that's why I think we need to at least offer things to people because the culture is shifting.
It's funny. We talk about compartmentalization, and Jim and I talk about that quite a bit on this show. But just what you're talking about right here, not only serial offenders being able to compartmentalize, but agents too. Agents have the ability to do that as well. And you talk about the ability, but when you look at some of these serial offenders and their ability to compartmentalize, did that shock you how they were, how they could turn it off and turn it on?
It didn't shock me. It surprised me. I have different levels of that. And the reason it didn't shock me, I think, is because I encountered folks like that before. So it's hard for me to go back to the very first time. But I was surprised at how effective they are at it. So when you look at people, right? And I knew quite a few undercover agents that compartmentalize things. And with most people, if you have a conscience, right, somehow or another, it's going to come out. And it's going to come out in some form of aberrant behavior that you don't want, just because you've never really dealt with it, because you compartmentalized it. But the people without a conscience that did such horrific things, it is pretty amazing that they can compartmentalize it and then talk about it as if they were getting a haircut with no emotion. Right.
Exactly. I find that fascinating. That fascinating. They're able to do that. And I remember in some of the interviews with some of the attorneys and some of the other people that worked the Kemper case that identified Kemper as a nice guy. They said, when you get to talk to him, he's really down inside. He's really a nice guy. And I'm thinking, how can you say that? I mean, you haven't seen the worst side of him then.
Well, Ray, do you remember? So I watched, if you recall, Ted Bundy, he defended himself, right? Just because he'd attended a couple of law classes. But when at the very end, and I've got the clip of this, all black and white, but the judge blew me away with this. He said, you're a nice young man. Sorry to have to sentence you like this, but I would like to have had practiced with you, he mean law, but you went the wrong direction, son. He called him son. He said, you're a nice guy. You did a good job. I'm like going, what? So the judge was the one that actually shocked me, having heard everything that Bundy did and looking at all this. And then it's still in summation, or for his summation, to say something like that was shocking.
Well, here's my thing on that, Jana and Jim. When you look at these people, and even law enforcement and attorneys, they're supposed to be so savvy and be able to read these people so well. And then you wonder, how do these offenders get their victims to come with them? And then you look at the regular people and they get sucked in just as these victims got sucked in. It's just that's what amazes me the most.
Yep. Yeah, and when you talk about Kemper too, like I said, he bought the beers for the guys, and anybody. I always look at it; it's kind of like dating. Anybody can be on your best behavior for an hour or two, right? So apparently, he wasn't showing any bizarre signs or whatever, and he bought him a beer. So hey, what a nice guy! It's so superficial when people make those kind of, somebody's nice, or I know him and he would never do something like that. It's kind of meaningless.
And there's other kind of killers out there that don't have that. We'll say personality characteristic, and they're the ones that get caught early on, or they flub the first type of kidnapping or assault, whatever, and they eventually get identified and put away before they have a chance becoming a serial rapist or serial killer. So it's interesting looking at all these type of personalities as we've gone through our profiling career, and certainly our investigative career, and what we've learned. So you didn't finish up in Denver, though, I don't believe, right?
Oh, sorry. No, did not finish up in Denver. And Denver's when 9/11 happened, and I was in charge of the office again. There was nobody else there, so we stood up the Emergency Operations Center. Won't go into all of that, but the reason I mentioned I was in Denver, because after 9/11, I really never saw Denver again for close to 10 months. I went immediately to Las Vegas. It was one of the smaller offices. All 19 hijackers had been there, and they were in a change of leadership. So we augmented that with 25 LA agents to cover all the leads. Then was sent to headquarters. I was home for one day, went to headquarters to work on Pent Bomb for 3 months. So I came home only once during that 3 months working on the Pentagon bombing. Came back for one day, and then I was one of 4 of the on-scene commanders for the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympics. And proud to say, or pleased to say, if you could take yourself back to that time, what a venue, right? To have thousands of people killed. although the intel was, was not clear, we were very concerned about there being another terrorist attack at the Olympics.
Sure.
Well, it was so great that most of the agents were whining and complaining because they were bored. I was never so glad to say, yes, we're bored. That's a good thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
So on my way leaving there, I got a call from Wanda Seifert, who was the assistant of then director, FBI Director Mueller. And so I get my cell phone, and he said, "Congratulations, you are the SAC of Los Angeles." So went home for 3 days and then reported to LA. From Los Angeles, I thought I was going to stay there. Still a little bit altruistic for as old as I was. I thought, wow, LA is always understaffed. They don't have all the resources they need. I'm going to build this office up and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I got to stay there 9 months before Director Mueller interviewed me for the cyber division. And again, kind of a bozo on mine. I said, "Oh, sir, I'm not who you need." And he was not much of a jokester, good leader, but not much of a jokester. I said, "Sir, I don't know what cyber is with an S or a C." And I'm kind of, haha. He didn't think that was funny. And he said, "No, I want you to be the director of this." I said, "Oh, no. I like my job as SAC. Thank you, but no, thank you." His response was, "I'm not asking you. You don't seem to understand. You are the new assistant director of the cyber division." So it was interesting.
And I believe that's where you finished your career, right?
Nope. And again, just so you know,
you're so hard to track.
He wanted that he was very benevolent. He said, "You're going to be testifying on the Hill a lot, so I want you for your leadership. You're also going to be building a team of predominantly non-agents. The FBI did not have the cyber skill set in the agent population, so we hired external non-agent people to run that, which was really a culture shock for them and for me dealing with them. But for personal reasons, my mom was still alive, and she had some very serious cancer. I asked to go back to the field just somewhere in the West Coast. So Director Mueller goes, "Why do you want to be demoted?" I said, "Special agent in charge is not considered a demotion by most agents." I felt like saying, because I don't have to work in headquarters anymore.
Yeah.
But I finished up I finished up as the SAC in Phoenix.
That's right. Okay. Now, we teased our listeners and our viewers a little bit before, but somehow you made a fashion statement in the venue of ballistic clothing for women. Walk us through that a little bit.
Okay. So this was a shooting incident that I was in Tampa. I won't bore you with what led up to it, and because I had requested the SWAT team and was denied. But so as I had anticipated, we knock and announce, and the offender was very dramatic, kind of like in the movies, "F you, I'm not going alive." Well, it was a 3 times you're out strike sort of thing. So he would have been looking at, life imprisonment. So we start shooting. Well, we're in not a great situation, a second level of a cheesy little apartment complex. And so I hide behind a pillar, and it wasn't completely covering me. And I actually got shot in the hair. But after the SWAT team did come and they introduced tear gas and whatnot to go in there. But the after action shooting investigation had indicated on some of the other shots where they were on the pillar and where some of my colleague men were standing, it would have been right about the navel area, would have been hit in that area. And our, as we used to call them, BPUs, protective BPUs, bulletproof undergarments. Ballistic. Thank you. Because I was in the police department, we just called them bulletproof vests. But anyway, so the female one was more like a breastplate. I'd refer to it as the focus was over the breast, but it didn't continue down past the navel area. And so I was thinking, well, that's a dangerous area. You don't want to get shot in that area. Why are our vests not more like our male counterparts? So you get it when you're in a shooting, the director or the deputy director, if the director's not around, calls you. So I got a call and, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, fine." "Okay, go out and have a beer with everybody." That was always if you're okay, just go have a beer. And he said, "Is there anything else I can do for you?" And I said, "Yes." And I explained the ballistic proof undergarment. And he said, "Well, tell you what, I will make sure you go to Quantico. We're going to do a new prototype for a vest, and you provide your input of what areas you think need to be covered and how it wasn't when you were in your shooting. So I took him up on his invitation and was honored to be able to provide some input.
And every female agent and law enforcement officer since then is probably appreciative of you and your input there.
And here, Jim told me, Jim,
you were the Versace of bulletproof vest.
Well, yeah, but Jim told me, Janet, that you were on the cover of Vogue.
Yeah.
or Guns and Ammo. Either one would have been a compliment.
More, yeah, with her.
Yeah, why not?
I was
right?
not. No, was not on the cover of Vogue. But, no. Thank you.
What a career! And you retired in 2006.
Yes.
Walk us through a little bit of that and tell us why you decided to write a book. And I know we didn't ask you everything about the book. Walk us through a little bit of that part.
I never really intended to write a book. I think like a lot of us, especially in our generation, and I know I'm older than you, but very private. And in the FBI, just very private as people. And then to me, I thought, gee, the market has been saturated with this type of topic. Surely no one's interested. And I was approached by a couple of different publishing companies, and they said, oh, you're wrong. You're wrong. I went to work in corporate. And that was a great experience because it fits into that does not kill you, will make you better, because I've been in a 30-year law enforcement cocoon. So it was very, very different. But when I started seeing different books come out about this, I thought, you know what? I don't need an advisor or a consultant. It's stuff that I did. I have all of my notes. There seems to be an interest. And then two other reasons. One of them is I've always felt very badly for the victims of all the violent crimes that I worked. As you well know, victims have no voice. And there's so much attention when you look, okay, Dahmer, Bundy, there's all these notorious names, but you don't know the victims. And I just thought one of the things that I learned with being around all this just really vicious, heinous crimes and all that, I'm going to call it evil. Because it's really few. If you look at the big population, right, it's a few percentage. But because of looking at that, it helped me to recognize the goodness in most people. So I worked very diligently to have the opposite effect on my attitude. I'm certainly not a Pollyanna, but it helped me to recognize how many people are just good people, and nobody's perfect, and they stumble into things, and it really, to me, it was amazing to have that new lens, that new optic to look at things. And I wanted to share that. And I also am very passionate about helping younger women and men go to that next level, whatever it is they're pursuing. And I thought this could be the platform to assist with that.
Sounds good to me, Ray.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So in this book, and you've been a very big, you champion the terminology as it surrounds victimology and how important it is to the crime. And in most cases, I remember when I first got involved in the behavioral science unit and working with them from the field, that when you'd go out and you'd talk to law enforcement, you say, what can you tell me about the victim? What can you tell me about victimology? And they had no idea what that was. And
right.
You almost had to educate them with it. And I totally agree with you, Jana, how important the victim is and how overlooked the victim is. And Jim and I try and spend a lot of time talking about them. And we're so glad you brought that up in this show today. So, I mean, it's overlooked so much that and it's just not right. So I'm very happy that there's people like you out there that have written a book that kind of deals with the victims. And then you talk about, and you say, even interviewing some of the victims or even some of the wives of some of these serial offenders, some of the information that may come to us, I think it's just fantastic. I think it really is good stuff.
And Jana, I know you're aware. I know you're aware of this, but we to begin season 2 of Cold Red, we interviewed an Australian stalker survivor. She asked us politely and respectfully not to refer to as a victim. I mean, she survived this guy, so right. She prefers survivor. So obviously, if someone is murdered, deceased, they're a victim. But those men or women, sexual assault or some kind of assault attempts, if they make it through it, a lot of them prefer to be called survivors. And I think that's kind of a good trend from the nomenclature of sort of the criminal justice world, to let them know that they're not just someone who has no control over the situation. That's what victim kind of, connotes. But with survivor, it's a different perspective there.
Absolutely. So, I think that shows the resilience of someone, the fight back. And like you said, to take charge of your own situation. Very much so.
Well, where can we get a copy of your book, Hearts of Darkness, Serial Killers, the Behavioral Science Unit, and My Life as a Woman in the FBI? Where can we get a copy of that?
Well, I know it's on Amazon.com, bookshop.org, and I've actually seen it in a couple of bookstores. So I did a book signing. It was kind of funny, not this bookstore. It's called Murder by the Book in Houston. And all they do, the whole bookshop, all it does is homicide cases, fiction and nonfiction.
I'm not even going to joke about nothing bad ever happening in that store, because that would be the definition of irony. But we're not going to go there.
Don't go there. Don't go there. Okay.
Do you have any TV appearances or a website you want to put out, anything like that?
Oh, I wish I could put out a website. That's a whole other story. Having trouble with that. It was supposed to have been up about 5 weeks ago. Hopefully it will be next week. Then I'll make sure that I get that out. But I've been doing a few little TV appearances here and there, and kind of working on a show that might come out. I don't know what's gonna come of that, but I'm letting other folks handle that for me, because it's certainly not my area of expertise or knowledge.
Well, I know enough about you personally, and of course your professional career. If you're involved as a tech advisor or consulting producer or something on a TV show or creator, it'll be certainly something worth watching. And if that ever happens, maybe you'd come back again and we could talk about that.
Sure. And, idea, though, because we talked about how there was a lot on Ted Bundy, and then, more recently the show Dahmer came out, but there hasn't been anything widespread about Kemper. And I think that's a missed opportunity for that type of information. Yeah. Not to glorify him by any means, but to
not at all.
Educate. Yeah. Because we did learn so much from him.
We did. We really did.
Well, we've gone a little bit over our usual hour. We want to thank you, Jana, for spending this time with us. Even we'll send you the check for overtime when in the next week. The check will be in the mail, right, Ray?
AVP. Yeah,
there's checks in this? I heard that.
You forgot to mention that to Ray.
You haven't gotten yours either, Ray? Jeez.
It's in the mail, Jim. It's in the mail.
Anyway, we want to thank you, Jana, for joining us and giving our audience a peek at an incredible 30-plus year career. Well, 22 for the FBI, but even more with that, with law enforcement. You've, of course, been a great guest. I'll tell everyone else out there, subscribe to the Cold Red Podcast and follow us on all Cold Red Podcast social media platforms and coldredpodcast.com. We'll see you next week with yet another special guest. They're all special, Ray. How can we make one more special than the other? But until next time, stay safe. Be aware of your surroundings. It might just save your life. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Jana. See you, everyone, next time.